fame on snowy mountain slopes around the world, skiers and boarders enjoying the excitement of speeding downhill. But it wasn't always that way. Earliest skiing was mostly going cross-country or off jumps. The modern alpine method of heading downhill can be traced to one man by the name of Hannes Schneider.
Ski baby ski, come ski with me. Ski baby ski, come ski with me. Ski baby ski, come ski with me. Ski baby ski.
In his later years, he called North Conway, New Hampshire, home. But his snowy start began in 1890 at the base of the Arlberg Pass in the tiny Austrian town of Steuben. His dramatic life story, from Nazi-occupied Austria to America, from farm boy to the father of alpine skiing, is one his own son, Herbert, now 86 years old, knows by heart.
His farmhouse where he lived happened to be right on the side of the hill. So what he used to do, he used to make a track, and so he would have more speed. He would put water on it so it'd be ice, and he would open the barn doors, and he end up flying into the hay.
Hannes Schneider loved speed and dominated in the first downhill races ever held. He was asked to teach his unique crouching style and the stem Christie, and so he began a lifetime of it in St. Anton, just on the other side of the Arlberg at first. And when World War I began, young Hannes would teach a new breed of ski troopers.
This is where my father got the big experience in how to teach skiing, and he took trained beginners, and in 4 weeks he had them ski in formation.
He married and had 2 children, Herbert in 1920 and Herta in 21, and the family would open the legendary Sporthaus Hannes Schneider. His international celebrity would grow with the new genre of ski movies. Director Arnold Fanck cast him in several in the 20s, including White Ecstasy, that involved lots of very fast skiing, and a storyline that involved teaching his Arlberg technique.
Anstemmen, Stemmbogen, Gewicht nach außen, Ski flach halten. So, jetzt nachkommen.
Those ski movies really popularized skiing, especially in the regions of Germany and all the flatlanders. They said, all of a sudden, oh, there is something we can do in wintertime, you know, instead say, oh my God, here we got another foot of snow, what are we going to do with it? So this opened up a whole new prospect of business. But this really gave it a big boost.
The Arlberg method and the Schneider Ski School had become internationally popular. Hannes himself was asked to travel to Japan to introduce the sport there, and he developed protégés.
People who taught skiing in St. Anton, they were all farm boys. And of course in wintertime they made more money teaching skiing than they ever would dream of. But of course another sideline was that all of the girls come around and saw the beautiful ski instructors. Wow. And father said, too bad they should see them in summertime when they have to clean out the stable and milk the cows in the field. So
Hannes met an Englishman who had come up with the notion of using gates in skiing to slow things down, and together they held the first Arlberg Kandahar races, their sights set on ski racing becoming an international sport. And by 1932, the Federation of Skiing had formed, and the first World Championships would include downhill and slalom, carving their path into the 1936 Olympics. But the peace and innocence of life on the European continent was being rocked by the Nazi influence of Adolf Hitler.
my father was very outspoken all the time against Hitler and Nazism, because he happened to be in Berlin and when Hitler took over in 1932, and he saw the things that went on and he didn't like it, so he became very outspoken.
Many of Schneider's protégés fled Europe and would begin teaching the Arlberg ski technique in America and around the world. Hannes hoped to protect his family from the Nazis. And what's that on the house?
Yeah, they threw ink on it.
Who did?
Oh, some of the Nazis.
He would try and fail.
That he was put out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning and went down to the county, was put in jail, and they stayed in jail there. And of course, one of the big things is, I think my mother went through hell during those times, I must say so, because they would come to her and said, now you better do this or you better do that, otherwise we're going to shoot your husband, and things like that happened on. But because of Father's international reputation, there was a lot of telegrams and mail sent into Germany that they felt that this shouldn't have happened. So, and at that time, Germany needed something nice to happen, so they released Father from jail, but he was not allowed to go back to San Anton.
Among those watching the fate of Hannes Schneider was an influential American named Harvey Gibson, who developed a ski area in his hometown of North Conway. He got word to Herbert and Ludwina that they could find a home there.
And there again, my mother is the one who made the decision. Said, as long as we cannot go back to San Anton, let's go away as far as we can. And this is how we ended up here in the United States. And I still remember it. That one morning, Mother came and woke Sister and I up and said, we got to go and pick up our passport because we're going to go to America. On the 9th of February, 1939, we landed in New York, and 2 days later, we were in North Conway, and Father and I skied on Cranmore.
They would be welcomed to New Hampshire with great fanfare, and they would have a big impact on the direction of skiing here and in America. Part 2 of the Hannes Schneider story after the break.